My stepmother called me the error of the past during my father's anniversary party, but my dad defended me and had to beg her for forgiveness because she'd lose everything along with her kids. A few days ago, Dad and my stepmother, Tiffany, celebrated their second anniversary together. They have been married for 2 years, and before that, they were in a relationship for 3 years. Altogether, I've spent almost 5 years having to put up with her. At 16, I really can't stand her. I only spend half the month at my dad's house because I'm with my mom the other half. I honestly don't like her, and it feels mutual because she doesn't like me either. Tiffany and her 2 kids, Jeremy and Ani, who are 18 and 15, also don't care much for me. The only reason we tolerate each other is because of Dad. Nothing more. We behave civilly when he's around, but when he's away, we all go about our separate lives, and that works for all of us. But recently, during the anniversary party, Tiffany randomly started coming at me, and I guess she didn't expect my dad to stand up for me, but he did, and that turned out badly for her. The worst part was that she was doing all this in public since many people were there for the celebration. I was there because Dad wanted me to be. Honestly, I was feeling quite uncomfortable. At one point, Dad asked me to join the family photo so I could have one with everyone, but since it included Tiffany and her kids, I wasn't really excited about it. So I tried to find a way to tell him I didn't want to get in the picture. While that was happening, Tiffany, who had a few drinks, chimed in that I should join the photo so they could have one with me and label it "The True Family and the Mistake of the Past." She and her kids started laughing at the joke, but no one else did. The rest of the guests were so stunned that no one said a word. I was about to say something when my dad stepped in to defend me. He simply turned around and told Tiffany that if she didn't apologize right then, it wouldn't be an anniversary party but the party for the end of their marriage. She seemed a bit shocked, but probably thought he was joking. She just said it was a little joke she made, that there was no need to get offended, so she wasn't going to apologize. Shortly after, Dad announced that the party was over, even though dinner hadn't been served yet. But it was clear he was furious and told Tiffany that since she chose not to apologize, the relationship was over. It was then she realized he wasn't joking, and things were getting out of hand. As the guests started heading out with their take-home meals, everybody was looking at her while she tried to apologize to my dad, but he made it very clear that the person she really needed to apologize to was me. After she had already refused once to do so, there was no way he was going to forgive her until she did. So, he and I got into the car while she kept trying to justify herself. But even then, she didn't apologize to me. She was just trying to talk to Dad, but he ignored her and we drove home in silence. When we arrived, he started packing up some of his things and told me to grab mine too, so I did. And even when Tiffany and her kids showed up a few minutes later and tried to talk to him, he ignored them. Within a few minutes, we were back in the car, and she was crying, but he didn't care. He dropped me off at my mom's house and said he'd be staying in a hotel for a few days. Until that point, he hadn't said much about the issue, but before leaving me at my mom's, he apologized and told me he regretted everything. He said he deeply regretted being selfish, and before I could see him cry, he took off and drove away. Since then, we've stayed in contact, and after school, I've been visiting him at the hotel for a few days. I could see he was miserable, but he told me he wouldn't talk to Tiffany until I forgave her. She's tried reaching out to me in the last few days multiple times to apologize, but honestly, I don't feel like forgiving her. The thing is, I know if I don't forgive her, and if Dad decides to end his marriage with her and her kids will lose everything. Their father passed away 13 years ago, and since then, she's been a single mom. She was able to quit her job and spend more time at home with her kids after marrying my dad, but before that, she was always working outside. Even though he's never been very kind to me, I can recognize that life has been hard for her and her kids. I won't go into details, but they've struggled a lot, and I know they'll lose everything, even with child support. So I don't know. Will I be the bad one if I decide not to forgive my stepmother for calling me a mistake of the past, even if my dad actually ends his marriage with her? Update 1. I've decided to sit down and talk with my dad about what he really wants, because I realized I was right. It seemed very unlikely that his decision about the marriage depended solely on whether or not I forgave Tiffany. There had to be something deeper. I was only thinking about my guilt and things like that at the time, so I didn't consider that part. But then after reading the comments, I figured there were likely many other reasons, and this was probably the last straw. So I talked to my dad about it and asked if that was the case. Finally, he broke down and told me I was right. He had been fighting with Tiffany for months, and things between them were extremely tense. He shared that he had been trying to keep everything from falling apart, and to be honest, he'd done a good job of keeping the cracks in his marriage hidden because during the last months, even when they argued when they were together, I didn't notice anything weird, or maybe I just didn't pay attention. Whatever it was, I had no idea any of this was happening behind the scenes. Their arguments were about something my dad wasn't initially comfortable sharing, but I insisted he tell me, and in the end, he did. The thing is, my dad has only been saving money for my college education because naturally, I'm his biological daughter. By the time he met Jeremy and Annie, they weren't exactly babies. Jeremy was 13 and Annie was 10. It just didn't occur to him to start saving for them, too. He explained that he didn't do it out of insensitivity. He thought he was already financially supporting all three after the marriage, and figured at least the college would be something they'd handle on their own. And I thought that was totally reasonable because, at the end of the day, they aren't his biological children. For some reason, Tiffany doesn't agree with any of this. A couple of months ago, she asked about the college savings for her kids, and my dad had to tell her he hadn't saved any money specifically for them. He said he had saved for me, but thought that maybe Jeremy and Annie would figure out a way to manage it themselves when the time came. Jeremy is taking a gap year now, but even then, Tiffany started freaking out and called him a bad dad, accusing him of caring only about me and not the rest of his family. He tried to explain that he would help them with loans and whatever they needed, but she insisted that the money he set aside for my education needed to be shared among the three. Dad didn't think that was fair, because in the end, they are his stepkids, and he didn't think it was right to take part of that money from me to give to them, and that's why they had been fighting for so many months. Then during the anniversary party, when she made that comment about me, that was the last straw for him. He told me he wasn't going to let her take advantage of him anymore. So at that point, in his mind, he was already planning to leave the marriage regardless of whether I decided to forgive her or not. He told me he had been feeling pretty terrible about things lately, and that Tiffany had made life at home very difficult for him. But he couldn't talk to anyone about it because it was very personal. In fact, he wouldn't have even shared it with me if I hadn't pressed him. And I'm glad I did, because I know he's always tried to be strong for me, and he always has been. But I think it was time for him to feel like he could share his problems with someone too. I told him I was really thankful he decided to stand up for me, and also for himself, because when it comes down to it, it's his money, and what he decides to do with it deserves respect. He doesn't have to feel guilty for not sharing that fund with his step-siblings, especially since it's not his responsibility. Honestly, if Tiffany was entirely helpless and had no money of her own, I might have a different opinion. But both my dad and I know she has her own savings that she hasn't touched since she started dating him because he has been covering most of the expenses. Her decision to quit her job was completely her own. By the time she told my dad, she had already quit and announced she wanted to spend more time with her kids. She had worked hard for most of her life to ensure they didn't lack anything. Now that she was married and no longer had to worry about money, she wanted to be a full-time mom for a while. She didn't ask for my dad's permission, nor did they discuss it. She just decided and did it. That might be part of the ball of problems between them, but my dad didn't want to create conflict then, so he went along without saying anything. At that time, he had no idea things would reach this point, so he didn't see it as a problem. But now he told me he regrets not having talked to her about it, because Tiffany, for some reason, feels like all the financial responsibility of their lives has to fall on him, which isn't fair, especially when her kids aren't his. Plus, 3 kids on one salary is a huge responsibility. He might have been open to having a fund for them, but if Tiffany were still working, and the college fund is something totally optional, my dad could decide not to use that money for my college as well, and she should be okay with that. Nobody has a right to that money, not Tiffany, not her kids, and not even me. It's entirely my dad's choice to decide who he wants to support with those funds, and if he decides it should be me, that should be perfectly okay because I'm literally his biological daughter. If she wants to send her kids to college, she should be using her savings and not skimping and trying to force my dad to do something he doesn't want to. Anyway, while we were talking about all this, I basically validated my dad's decision. I told him to follow his gut. If he wants to fix things with Tiffany, then he should talk to her. As much as I dislike Tiffany, I obviously want my dad to be happy, and I know he's been miserable without her these past few days. So I told him if he wanted to give her one last chance and see what happens, then he should do it. But if he's already decided he wants to end that marriage and can't keep going with her, then he should talk to a lawyer. After our discussion, he told me he was very grateful I wanted to talk to him and dig into the issue because otherwise he would still be confused. He said he needs a bit of time to think, and in the last few days Tiffany has tried to call him several times, but he's been ignoring her to have his own space. However, he thinks now's the time to break that silence because if he wants to find a resolution, he'll eventually have to talk with her again. He apologized again for not doing what he should have in the past, for pretending everything was fine in his new family when it clearly wasn't, and for not dealing with the issues. But I told him not to worry because I know he tried to keep the balance the best way he could. He's human. At least he made his best effort, and that's what I value the most. As for Tiffany and her kids, they've already decided they weren't going to care about me. So even if I had been the sweetest and kindest person in the world, they still would have found an excuse to treat me badly. In the end, I did want him to be happy, so I guess we all made certain sacrifices, but I don't blame him for that. Putting that aside, my dad told me that he would handle all of this alone, and that I don't have to worry about it or respond to Tiffany because it's not my problem. And that was a relief because I've been feeling pretty stressed about having to talk with her since she's been bombarding me with messages and apologies these last few days. I've been ignoring her, and she's been getting more and more persistent, but he assured me this shouldn't be my problem, so he's asking me to block her or at least not pay attention to her messages. After talking with my dad, I decided to silence her. So, yeah, that's what happened, and I'm glad I talked to my dad about all of this. I learned a lot of things, and now I'm no longer worried about everything. Whatever happens, he'll figure it out. I'm sure of that. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update. My life has practically returned to normal after that last talk I had with my dad, which I mentioned here. I silenced Tiffany, so her messages are no longer an issue, and since then, I've mostly forgotten about it. My dad stayed in the hotel for about 3 or 4 days after our conversation, but eventually he came back home. He's a generally reserved person, and since these are such personal issues, I had to insist he share things with me because I'm his daughter, and I don't want to see him sad. Even though at first he was laughing off the situation, he eventually realized that I was serious, and that I genuinely wanted him to tell me what was going on with Tiffany and my step-siblings, no matter how difficult it was. I know there's that whole parentified daughter situation, but honestly, I'm just worried about my dad. After the divorce, he and my mom stopped talking unless it was related to me. They're cordial with each other, but that's about it. He isn't very close to his parents either, nor does he spend much time with friends. He's always been a bit of an introvert. But after our conversation, I started to realize he has practically nobody to talk to about his issues. He handles everything alone. And I feel bad about that because I've never stopped to think about what he might be going through. I'm still not 18, nor do I think I'm going to fully grasp all his problems, nor do I think I could solve them. But I think that even if he can talk to me about them, that could help him a bit. Obviously, he didn't want to do this because I'm his daughter and wants to keep a strong image for me. He wants to avoid burdening me with his issues or turning me into his emotional outlet. That's what he told me. But I explained that it's not about that. I care about him and want him to be happy. So he promised he would tell me what was happening with Tiffany, but I had to promise that I wouldn't obsess over the situation because I tend to do that. That was our deal. And he has kept his part, keeping me updated on what's happening with Tiffany while I've kept my promise and not obsessed over it too much. So far, unfortunately, it doesn't look like things are going very well with her. It's not like we're talking about her every day, but in the last 2 weeks, every time something significant has happened, my dad has told me. So I have limited information, but from what I understand, since returning home, Tiffany has reverted to her old attitudes. He returned with the intention of fixing things with her and trying to find a reasonable solution, but that has proven to be nearly impossible because she refuses to find a sensible resolution. Luckily, she stopped insulting me, but that doesn't mean she's given up on what she wants. Even now, she continues telling my dad he absolutely must divide the college fund into 3 parts because if he doesn't, there's no solution to the problem. My dad has mentioned that she has her own savings and she can send her kids to college if she wishes, but she keeps saying that money is for her retirement. They're in a negotiation that's going nowhere. I don't see a favorable outcome. She even went as far as bringing up that I have my mom, but that her children only have her. And while that's true, the reality is that my mom doesn't make as much money as my dad, so in theory she could chip in, but it would be really tough for her to pay for everything by herself. I also can't ask my stepdad to do that, which is exactly what her kids are doing with my dad. During the divorce, my mom didn't take a single cent from him and rejected alimony too. So he wants to honor that by taking care of my college education financially. Furthermore, when I was younger, it was my mom who did most of the housework and took care of me while my dad would come home super tired from work. So she already did a lot for me, and my dad knows that and appreciates it. He also knows that if he asked my mom to chip in for my education, she would never say no. But that would put her in a tight financial situation, and he doesn't want to do that. I think that's perfectly reasonable, and he even explained it to Tiffany, but she seems unfazed by it. Since she can't say anything about me now, she's using that argument, claiming my dad doesn't care about her but seems to care a lot for his ex. I don't know how my dad is handling all this, because talking with Tiffany must be incredibly frustrating, and the fact that he doesn't even tell me half of what's going on makes me realize how tough this whole situation must have been for him over the past few months. Now that I know what's going on, I just hope things get sorted out quickly. Whatever the result is, I really hope it's the best for my dad. But considering that my dad gave her another chance and she keeps insisting on same issues, I don't think that's defensible in any way. Tiffany has been completely selfish, but that doesn't surprise me given how she treated me in the past. To be honest, I don't even think she cares about my dad as much as he cares about her. It's just a hunch. I could be wrong, but that's how I feel. I've never said it out loud because I didn't want it to become reality, but now I've started to think he might have been right all along. Maybe Tiffany married my dad not because she loved him, but because he could support her financially. And that's the bitter truth. Maybe he already knows that, but of course I'd never tell him as it would destroy him. I think anyone with common sense who knows what went on between my dad and Tiffany would reach the same conclusion. It's sad because I know he loves her a lot. He has done so much for her, and this is how she chooses to repay him. I don't think she realizes she's risking everything in her marriage just over this matter. I don't even understand why she's clinging to it so tightly, because it's not like her kids couldn't go to college if my dad doesn't fund it. If she's worried about her retirement, she should trust that her kids will help her if she assists them with her savings. Maybe there lies the problem. She doesn't trust them and prefers another person to put that money in for her. Just thoughts I'm writing down. I don't know what you think about all this drama with my stepmother and her kids. Update 3. It's been 6 days since my last update, and today, my dad called to tell me he just had a major fight with Tiffany, and now he made the decision to file for divorce for real this time. He said he's going to be staying with a friend over the next few days, so I won't be able to see him, but he'll make it up to me next month because by then he hopes to have found an apartment. He easily could have kicked Tiffany and her kids out, but then they wouldn't have any place to go, so he's letting them stay in the house as he plans to rent an apartment until this whole thing is resolved. But he sounded pretty sure on the phone, and I think now he will follow through with the divorce. It makes me sad that things didn't work out for him, but in a way, I feel relieved that he can finally put this all behind him, because over the last few days, whenever I called him, he sounded incredibly stressed. I believe that during the upcoming divorce process, things will be hard for him, but eventually, it'll be for the best in the long run. I'll let you know what happens after. Update 4. It's been a month since my last update, and my dad and Tiffany are moving forward with the divorce process, but he thinks it should be resolved pretty quickly. Tiffany is making unreasonable alimony requests, but he believes she won't be able to maintain them for long if she doesn't want to keep spending money on attorneys. She's going to vacate the house once the divorce is finalized, and in the meantime, she is looking for a place to live. My dad is staying in a cozy rented apartment for now. As for alimony, her demands are absurd because she was the one who chose not to work. The problem is my father thinks he should not accept that, and if she keeps insisting, he's likely to lose money fighting a losing battle against an attorney. My dad has proof that she unilaterally decided not to work, so he's willing to fight this and not pay a single cent. She has even requested some of the money from the fund, but Dad is also unwilling to give her that. The only thing he is going to give her is that she leaves with her savings, and that's all. He doesn't care how much savings she has when it comes to dividing assets, as long as she doesn't touch his. She might leave not liking it, but my dad has accepted that this is just how it is. So far, she has done nothing but act hostile towards him, but he seems to be handling it well. Although he's saddened by what's happening, it's something unavoidable, so he's accepted it. It's what I want as well. Now I just hope he can finally be happy and not have to deal with any other issues. Update 5. Now we know why her savings were sacred. It's not because they were for her retirement plan, but rather because there was actually no money saved at all. She never had, or managed to save up to begin with. In truth, my dad was the golden ticket to her kids' college funding. Tiffany has been begging my dad right up to the last minute to divide that fund he set aside for me, even going as far as pleading with him. He told her savings should be enough, and if she didn't want to use them for her kids, then that was her problem. Then she confessed to him that she didn't have savings, or at least not enough to get by, and if she didn't receive anything from this marriage, she would be left with nothing. My dad said he felt sorry for her kids, but even so, he wasn't giving her more money. She should have thought about that before leaving her job, since her kids were simply her sole responsibility, and he had already paid for them while they lived there. It felt like a lie about what she was telling even to her children, until the very last moment. When divorce proceedings concluded and they asked her if she would use the savings for her kids' education, the truth came out. Well, the eldest took it very badly, which led him to find a job and move out of the house he shared with his mother, meaning my dad's place, and the younger one ended up leaving with him. Now Tiffany is struggling to find a place to live because the deadline to stay at my dad's house has expired, and now he's back at home. Although she's attempting to win at least her daughter back to live with her, I'm not sure that will be possible after such manipulation. She made it seem for months that she at least had her savings, but that she was struggling to get money from my dad in the divorce, and in the end, the heartbreaking reality slapped them in the face. She told them, "There's nothing at all." They responded with, "Well, you're left with nothing." I think it's fair that she ended up with nothing. No money from my dad and no affection from her children. She thought she was playing life's game in peaceful difficulty while making it hard for others, only for someone to up the stakes without her asking.